The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday. It's Tuesday, man. Tuesday night. Hope everybody's having a good week, a great week, as the world, the United States, is slowly shutting down all around us. But we keep going. And we keep fighting, and we stay engaged, and we keep pursuing our values and our happiness. And, you know, that's why you listen to this show, to be inspired, to pursue your values, your happiness, and not to hell with it, but ignore the noise. But we're going to talk about some noise today. We're going to talk about some noise coming out of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, I guess. We will talk about the World Economic Forum in Davos, and we'll talk about what's coming out of there. And it's interesting. Anyway, a few housekeeping things. One, if you haven't heard the interview I did with Lex Friedman, you should. And not only should you listen to the interview, because I think it's really good, and I think you'll enjoy it, and I think you'll get something out of it, but you should subscribe to Lex's podcast, web channel, whatever, because he's a really good interviewer. The questions are deep, he's thoughtful, he's focused on his values and what interests him. He's not just going through the motions. He really is, you get a sense that he's a real truth seeker. And so I encourage you to subscribe to his channel and listen to my interview. I think we're well over 100,000 already on the interview. So whether, it's 3 hours long, it's pretty cool that many people listen to a 3 hour long. I've seen a lot of comments. There are a lot of comments, there are a lot of haters, but I don't focus on the haters. The haters are a waste of time. But I focus on the people who say things like, well, now I'm going to go read Ayn Rand, or, wow, I listened to that 3 times, and it resonated with me. There's something here. I'm going to go read Ayn Rand. So that's why I do it. I do it so people will go and read Ayn Rand, that people will go read Leonard Peikoff, that people will subscribe to this podcast. And we've had, in the last, 4 or 5 days, we've had 800 new subscriptions to the channel. 800 new subscriptions to the Yaron Brook Show from the Lex Friedman interview, and I think that's going to keep growing. So I thought the interview was great. I thought Lex was fantastic. I think you should all follow Lex. You should subscribe to his channel, and I'm really looking forward to an opportunity to talking to him again and expanding even broader the kind of topics we talked about during the interview. So that's going to be cool. All right. So that was one housekeeping thing I wanted to get clear, and do that. Second, we have a match tonight, a super chat match. Jonathan Honing has got us going with the $1.99, and that's going to be matched immediately. The match is the biggest match we've ever received, because the match tonight is for $1,500, $1,500. Now, we need to make sure that we are not going to disappoint the guy who, John, who has put up this match. So this is a challenge to you as much as it is to me. Let's get to $1,500 at least. I mean, we could go over that. That'd be great. But let's at least make sure that we get every last dollar from John that he is committed to this. So I'm excited about this. John is a great supporter of the show. He's been a supporter of the show for a long time now. He wanted to do something that would get other people excited and other people motivated and other people, to get behind this idea. So you can do this in two ways. You can do it right here on Super Chat, which is great because then I'll answer your questions. And as you know, the bigger the dollar amount associated with the question, the more likely it is that I'll answer. So we can do the Super Chat, and we've beaten $1,500 before on a Super Chat match. We've gone to $3,000 on a Super Chat thing, so we can do it. So would love to see lots of questions associated with big dollar amounts. So please, let's get that going. And the other way is if you don't want to use YouTube, you don't want to use the Super Chat, you can do it on PayPal. So just go to PayPal, paypal.me/YaronBrooksShow, and you can contribute directly there. Thank you, Gabriel. You can contribute directly there. I'm going to try to keep track of all these dollars. It's going to be tough. That's why I need some big ones, because the big ones are easier to keep track of. But I'm going to keep track of this, and so that I can let John know at the end of the night what we made, and he's going to make a PayPal contribution of the $1,500 if we make it to $1,500. So again, $1,500 match. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Jonathan, for getting us off, and we will keep going. Daniel, oh my God! Now I have to do currency exchanges. I forgot about that. So is that real? Is that what $50? What currency? Anyway, you'll have to. We'll have to figure that out. All right. Today we've got a topic that should make people happy, because I get accused often of not going after the left enough, which is a little bizarre because I spent almost the entire summer going after the bogus stuff on the left, particularly the racism stuff and all of that. But today we're going to go after something that's in the news. It's out there. It's being discussed a lot in a variety of different ways. Thank you, those of you who are translating that into U.S. dollars. That is a lot of help. All right, we're on our way to $1,500. All right, we'll keep it up. Thank you guys. Thank you guys who've already donated. Also, if you have a good way of going out there and letting people know this is happening, go out and get people to come. Invite people to join the conversation so we can grow this thing and expand it. And for those of you who are here for the first time because you came to me because of the interview with Lex, welcome. Love to have newbies, and I'm eager to answer any questions you have on any topics you might have on any so anything. So far, we got in contributions without questions, but you're more than welcome to attach a question to the contribution. So today I want to talk about what's called the Great Recess. Recess. We're going on recess. We're going the Great Reset. Thank you, Emmett. I am going to, I'm going to just copy paste that question. Questions that are off topic, I will promise to get to. We'll go as long as we need to tonight. I promise to get to, but I'll get to them later. I want to get this topic down. I want to get this issue of the Great Reset done. And when you look at the Great Reset and you read about the Great Reset, you'll get a lot of stuff. There's a lot of content out there on this issues, and it's interesting because there's a ton of conspiracy theory stuff. There's a ton of just nonsense about it. There's just a lot of stuff out there. And what I want to try to do today is just try to make sense of it all, right? Because, again, there's so much that is available. All right, let's see. We've got 160, 180. We're at 210. Actually, if somebody's willing to volunteer, somebody on the chat who's going to be here the whole show and is willing to volunteer to do this and to keep track, that would really, really, really help me so I don't have to focus on that while we're also trying to talk about the Great Reset. Anyway, the Great Reset sounds conspiratorial. It sounds like something that would come out of, one of the conspiracy theory things on the right. But it's actually not. It's actually real. It is real. There's a whole website dedicated to this. And you can find that website. Just search The Great Reset and you'll find the website. And the website is not created and not done by kooks. More than that, there are podcasts now. There's a series of podcasts. We'll actually listen to a section of one of the podcasts in a little bit. I couldn't find a good video on this, although I'm sure they are. We'll do one of these podcasts. And it's these are legit podcasts, and they speak to people on the left and people on the right, and people from conservative think tanks and people from very liberal think tanks, and this is real. This is real. The sponsor of the Great Reset is the World Economic Forum. Again, sounds conspiratorial. It sounds like one of those groups that gets together and tries to run the world. And they don't need to get together and try to run the world, because the World Economic Forum is this meeting that happens in Davos, Switzerland, every January, and the people there actually do run the world. So, it's not a conspiracy. It's just that's who they are. It's the CEOs of all the big businesses in the world. It's the politicians, the leading politicians from the entire world, from the President of the United States. I think 2 years ago, Donald Trump was there, to the leaders of the rest of the world, including the Premier of China goes there. They're all there. The World Economic Forum is a real thing. It's open. I know people who've spoken there. I know people who've gone there. And it's in Davos. It's covered by the press. It's covered by the media. And it's really there. And, they are the sponsors of this whole idea of the Great Reset, resetting the world. That's their terminology, not mine. They want to reset the world. Now, I want to reset the world. Most of you are following the show because you want to reset the world, right? So, resetting the world, that's a good idea. But the question really is, resetting it to what? Resetting it to what? At the end of the day, the Great Reset is an attempt by, I'd say, primarily global intellectuals that is going to be supported by businessmen and politicians to move the globe towards a more statist, towards a more, I would say, fascist rather than socialist, but fascism is in a sense a type of socialism. But certainly here, the idea is not to get rid of business, not to get rid of private property, as it's understood by the mixed economists, but to really utilize it for the so-called common good. Utilize it for these broader concepts. So this is really an attempt to bring about a type of global fascism couched as democracy, couched as, as what the people really want. Are people having problems? The audio is clipping? I don't know why the audio would clip. I've got the volume's not very high. I've got a compressor, condenser, whatever it's called. I've got the anti-clipping stuff in place. I'm not sure why it would clip, but all right, it's clipping. All right, we're at about, I'm guessing here at about $300. So we've still got a long way to go, guys. Still got $1,200 to go. So, Jason is doing his part. Jason's doing his part. Definitely, he's done a bunch of questions. JDS, thank you for that. Nick, thank you. Ragnar of the Desert, thank you for all the support. We've got $1,200 to go. So don't forget, we've got a $1,500 match today for Super Chat, $1,500 match. So what are the principles? What are the principles of the Great Reset? And again, this is a global institution. This is a real institution, the World Economic Forum. It has the elites of the world attend it. By the way, the launch of the Great Reset was not just done by the World Economic Forum. Prince Charles, from England, the prince guy, Diana's husband. Maybe you know that way you'll know who it is. If you're watching The Crown, season 4, Prince Charles is featured heavily. Anyway, Prince Charles is part of this. The United Nations, you'll love this. The United Nations is part of it. And the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and I think the World Bank, all part of this. So this is legit. This is, I would say, mainstream, global power centers, intellectuals, crossing with politicians, roping in the business community into this, right? Roping in the business community into this. Now, instead of me telling you what it is about, what I thought is to play a little bit of audio, and we'll do like I always do, I'll cut him off all the time and comment on what he's saying. But I think it's interesting to listen to Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab is the guy who initiated the Great Reset. He is the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. He's just written a book where he sets out his vision of the Great Reset. And he is putting all the pieces together. He is a big global influencer. He's got the perfect accent for the role. Perfect accent for the role. He could play a villain in a James Bond movie. But he is, this is his idea, but the world has rallied, or the global elites, if you will, the intellectual elites, the business elites, the political elites have rallied around this. This is, as you'll see, this is primarily a phenomenon of the left, but there's a lot of people on the right who embrace big chunks of this, if not the whole thing. They certainly embrace big chunks of it. And the problem is, let me start with the problem. The fundamental problem with this, I mean, not the philosophical problem, the fundamental existential problem with all of this, is that there is no opposition to this. That this agenda has no opponents. That, as we'll talk about, the left embraces it wholeheartedly, the center embraces this wholeheartedly, and the right embraces pieces of it and can't fight it as a whole because it embraces big pieces of it. So it really is up to us, those of us who believe in individualism, those of us who believe in freedom, those of us who believe in liberty, in free markets, in capitalism. We're it. And we're the smallest minority, but we're it. There's nobody else who's going to take up this cause. Certainly not what I'll call the new right, the Tucker Carlson right. That's not happening. Tucker loves pieces of it. He doesn't love others, but I think he'll come to love others. All right. So let's listen to Klaus Schwab, and we'll stop it in the middle. And by the way, if you want to, again, research this, you can find, there's a whole website created by the World Economic Forum for this, and we'll try to break this down and figure out, okay, what are they really after? What is motivating them? Right. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Ragnar of the Desert, for keeping track of all this. Your numbers don't match completely, but they're close enough. We're basically raised $300, and again, well, $320. Thank you, Michael. We need, $1,200 more to not, in a sense, waste the match, right? Not waste the match. So there's a $1,500 match. Please, those of you coming to the show now, and don't forget to like the show before you leave. Some of you only listen to a few minutes and then leave. If you like the show, please like the show before you leave. All right, let's jump in with Klaus. Let's listen. Here is his interpretation of what the Great Reset means. And notice how this is all set up.
At a virtual press conference to launch the book, Professor Schwab said humanity now had to make big choices about the future.
So, I forgot to say, before we go there, why the Great Reset? Why now? The whole point of this is we have an opportunity. What was it Rahm Emanuel said? I'm sure he was citing somebody else. Never let a crisis go to waste. Never let a crisis go to waste. What is the crisis? Well, the crisis is COVID. The Great Reset is the reset to the global political and economic system post-COVID. So as you'll hear, we have learned certain things about the world, what the world can do, what the world can get away with, what is good for the world, what is bad for the world. We've learned all these things from COVID. We're going to exit COVID. As we exit COVID, we need a reset. We need to change the world. Never let a crisis go to waste. This is the crisis that cannot go to waste. This is the reset that is now going to move us forward, right? That is now going to provide the opportunity for these people to do what they want to do what they think is right, to do what they think needs to happen in the world. All right, so let's listen to Klaus.
We are at a turning point of humankind.
We're at a turning point of humankind. Notice, the COVID has created a turning point in humankind. Why? I don't think he's going to tell us. We just know it is a turning point. It's an opportunity. Never let a crisis go to waste.
I think we should not underestimate the historical significance of the situation we are in. We know the world will look differently when we move out from the acute phase of the virus into a new situation. Now, we have three options for the new situation.
So, notice, this is all about we, the global we, this is not even a country we, it's a true global we are going to move out of the crisis, and we have three options on kind of what is our behavior going to be post-crisis. What could we do post-crisis? Now, you know what I think we should be resetting the world is towards more capitalism, more individualism, more self-interest, more of the things that create values, that make it possible for us to value and to enjoy those values. Note what his three options are going to be. He'll start with the option that he least likes. Whoops, where's the play button?
The first one is that all the negative aspects which we have seen during the crisis, and I refer to the egoism which has increased, I would say, on an international, national, but also, let's face it, on an individual level.
So notice, I mean, this guy is intellectual. He gets it, and he gets what the terminology needs to be. And to him, the number one problem is if we embrace egoism. Now, what does he consider egoism? Well, what he considers egoism in this context is that people... It's like Krugman's article about Ayn Rand. You remember Krugman's article about Ayn Rand? Egoists don't care about other people. Egoists never wear a mask. Egoists sneeze on other people just to get them infected, because who cares about other people, right? That's egoism. And of course, egoism means on a state basis that countries don't coordinate with one another, that countries do different policies from one another, that some countries don't play along. But he says, on a personal level, so the first step is attack egoism. That is step number one. These guys know what they're doing. Don't be selfish. Don't be self-interested. Don't pursue your own values. That is incompatible with a post-COVID world.
That these negative tendencies will even increase, will continue. I would say in this case, I'm very concerned about the life of my grandchildren.
So, and we'll get to the life of his grandchildren in a little bit, because this is important to him. Notice that he doesn't have to say anything to prove that egoism is bad. He just states it. He just states it. So egoism is bad. and we don't want it, and it has bad consequences. An egoist don't care about his grandchildren, and an egoistic policy post-COVID is destructive and bad. And he doesn't have to say in what way it's bad. He doesn't have to articulate the case, because all he has to say is egoism, and that triggers in people an immediately negative response. Right? An immediate negative response. That's all he has to count. And this is...
The second situation is...
This is why our job is so difficult. Those of us who believe in egoism, proper egoism, those of us who believe in Ayn Rand's philosophy, those of us who are trying to argue for Ayn Rand's philosophy, is if we talk about egoism, what's triggered in people's minds is exactly what Klaus assumes is going to be triggered in people's minds. We then have to explain. We have to articulate. We have to show them that it's the opposite of what, not the opposite, that's wrong. It's completely different. It's in a sense in a different dimension than his conception of egoism. Somebody asked me, I saw a comment somewhere, maybe it was under Lex Friedman's, under the podcast, somebody says, all we need now is people this guy's telling us people are not egoistic enough. Really? Not selfish enough? Really? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm telling you. Because to me, selfishness is not about, this is important, particularly for you guys who are relatively new to this. Selfishness is not about doing what you feel like doing. It's not about following your emotions, your desires, your whims. Egoism is about taking your life seriously. Egoism is about pursuing, thinking, figuring out what your values are and should be, and pursuing them rationally with reason. Egoism means, again, taking your life seriously, which means thinking, using your mind, being rational, pursuing values rationally. How many people do that? On a global scale, how many people do that? I mean, maybe some of you guys do it, but how many people regularly live it, do it, constantly? Almost nobody. And that's why, yes, we need more selfishness in the world, because more egoism in the world, because there's not a lot of it right now. There's very little of it. There's superficiality. There's whim worship. There's people driven by emotions. But what there isn't is real egoism. All right, let's keep listening to Klaus.
So people assume we are just going back to the good old...
Whoops, sorry.
Which we had, and everything will be normal again in how we are used to normal, in the old fashion. This is fiction. It will not happen. The cut which we have now is much too strong in order not to leave traces.
So option number one is we become more egoistic, and I think his view on a international scale, that probably means we move more towards right-wing authoritarianism. Option number two is we go back to normal, the way it was before COVID. And he says, that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Too much has happened. Too much is involved. We're not going back to normal. So what is option number three? All right, we're up to almost $500. So we've still got $1,000, guys. $1,000, that's a lot of money. So somebody's going to have to step up with some $100, $500, some $250s, some good contribution. Now remember, this is a trade, value for value. You get value for me. This is you paying for it, like you would pay Netflix, like you would pay some other service. And I know a lot of you already are big supporters of my show, so I appreciate that. It would be great to get some new people. Justin, thank you. And I know most of you cannot afford, when I say 50, 100, 500, most of you can't afford that. Even $2. It doesn't, helps a little bit, get us to 1,500, but is appreciated immensely by me, because I know $2 for some of you is a significant amount of money. So thank you for all of you who are making the contributions today. If we can get to 1,500, that's great. So Klaus is saying we can't go back to normal. Why? Well, because COVID has changed everything, he says. He doesn't say why. Now, I agree with him. We're not going to go back to normal. COVID has proved a lot of things. We'll talk about some of the things it's proved. Among them, there were sheep. Among them, that will tolerate authoritarianism in ways that nobody could have imagined. And he will say that COVID has proved that we can do public-private partnerships, that corporations and government can work together, all these things. So COVID has changed the mindset of the world and of Americans. COVID has changed the mindset of politicians in terms of what they think they can get away with. Thank you, Alex. COVID has changed the world in which we live. It is true. We are not going back to the way things were. And look, the way things were was not great. A mixed economy is never great. A mixed economy has to go somewhere. A mixed economy, for those of you new to the concept, is a mixture of some freedom and some control, some capitalism and some socialism. But a mixed economy never stays put. It either moves towards socialism or towards capitalism. The egoism he's expressing is move towards capitalism. He says that's not going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. I agree with him. The alternative is to stay where we are. That's not going to happen. Then are we moving towards more socialism? A type of socialism? Let's listen to where he wants us to move.
And then we have the third possibility, to construct a new concept based on the learnings, on the observations we have seen, and to create really a more resilient, a more inclusive, and a more sustainable world.
More resilient, more inclusive, and more sustainable. More resilient, more inclusive, more sustainable, right? We'll come back to some of these ideas. What does that mean? What does that mean to be more resilient, more sustainable, more inclusive? These are the terms you're going to hear a lot of in the next few years. These are the terms you're going to hear a lot of from the Biden administration. These are going to be the words you're going to hear from AOC and from the people on Biden's left who are going to be pushing and tugging and pulling him leftwards. And who are going to be putting him right, and right on what issues? That's going to be the challenge. But let's see what this breaks down to, what this actually involves.
Be achieved. Professor Schwab sets out 5 priorities that should be built into the Great Reset.
5 things, 5 priorities. The first one is we have to redefine our social contract.
We define the social contract. Now, for those of you who don't know what the social contract is, the social contract is this abstraction that comes from, I think it comes from Rousseau. I think it comes from Rousseau. And it's the idea that you and the state, when you're born into the state, you've got a contract. The contract is that the state provides you with X, Y, Z, and that you pay your taxes, you're loyal, you do the things expected of you. And in exchange, depending on the social contract, what you believe the social contract should include, it should include, the kind of free market social contract. I don't really believe in a social contract. You can't have a contract which you didn't sign. Is the idea that the government will protect you from force, will protect you from coercion, will protect you from authority, will protect you from your neighbor trying to steal your stuff. But the social contract has evolved from that idea, which I don't think was ever Rousseau's idea, that's kind of the free market interpretation of it, to this idea of, well, we need to guarantee your basic income, and we need to guarantee your job, and we need to guarantee you health care, and we need to guarantee you all. But there's a contract. There's this relationship between the state and the individual. And we need, Klaus tells us, we already have a pretty broad social contract. We have a lot of responsibilities from the state. And of course, what this demands is your obedience. You signed a contract. You have to abide by it. You have to pay your taxes, pay them on time, pay as much as they require. And do the things that society, in quotes, expects you to do. Behave yourself. Don't step out of line. Don't be too radical. Don't say the wrong things. You signed a contract. That's the whole idea of a social contract. So when a lot of times when I give a lecture or something, people say, but what about the social contract? Right? You have accepted these terms. Why are you challenging them? And I'm going, I never accepted them. When did I accept them? Show me my signature. Show me my choice. I didn't choose to be born. I was born into this world. And I believe when you're born into this world, you're born free. You're born with rights. You're born with the freedoms to act in pursuit of your own life, your own happiness. I didn't sign a contract. There is no contract. So, there's already, in a sense, an expansive view of the social contract. Klaus, our good friend Klaus, wants to reframe that. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, John. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Alex. Really appreciate it. I know these are small contributions, but they mean a lot that you're supportive.
Integrate more inclusion. We also have to make sure that we integrate much more in a social contract our responsibility towards the next generation.
So more inclusive is the whole social justice. More inclusive is code word for, the whole Black Lives Matter, systemic racism, all of that. We need to make sure that everybody is included, everybody benefits, everybody is supported, everybody moves forward. It really is a concern with the big issue, which he doesn't name, but it's the big issue. One of the big, I'd say the three big issues, three big agenda items that they have. I'll get to that later. But one of them is inequality. And inclusive means no inequality or less inequality. We need to get rid of the inequality that exists. Inequality is a huge problem. Being more inclusive means less inequality.
Cannot just think of the debt, leave all the solutions and to be paid for by the next generation.
He's actually talking about the debt here. And the debt is too high. And we're leaving the debt to future generations. I find this interesting because nowhere in their program, in the Great Reset, do I see anything about how you deal with that debt, how they propose to deal with that debt. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Skylar. That's great. Thank you, Adam. That's fantastic. And thank you, Lester. So they never mention how they're going to deal with the debt. The debt is just, we shouldn't burden future generations with it. How do you do that? Nobody ever says.
So the social contract, and in the social contract, we also have to look at one specific issue. So COVID will create again a gap between the so-called industrialized and emerging countries.
So it's not just inequality between people. It's inequality between countries. Inequality between countries, by the way, that has been closing rapidly as the developing world has become richer, has become less poor, has become more free. But that's not good enough for them. They are worried, and it's true actually, that COVID might increase that inequality. I actually don't think it will. I think poor countries have done better with COVID than rich countries, because rich countries can, quote, afford to shut down, whereas poor countries haven't. So economically, they've taken a lot less of a hit from COVID than rich countries. So I don't think the economic so-called inequality will expand under COVID. But here it does, and he's worried, and he wants more shrinkage of inequality on a global scale. Now that's ambitious, guys. That's ambitious.
The emerging countries, at least some of them, suffering much more compared to some of the countries which have a well-established social safety net.
Is that really true?
Second, it's the decarbonization of the economy.
So being more inclusive means to, A, reduce inequality. Second, it's to decarbonize the economy. Now, I've often said the only way to decarbonize is to die. I mean, you emit carbon in every breath that you take. So the only time you stop emitting carbon is not just when you're dead, but when you're actually decomposed, because the decomposition process, I think, emits carbon as well. So, Decarbonize the economy. Good luck with that.
Factors against an environmental virus. And here we will publish tomorrow, by the way, a report which shows clearly that there is no contradiction between taking care of nature and particularly creating the need to create jobs and to invigorate the economy.
So notice the massive Keynesian fallacy here, and it's not just Keynesian, it's this idea that what creates wealth, what creates jobs, what creates economic activity is money printing. It doesn't matter what the job is. It doesn't matter how productive it is. It doesn't matter what its real value is. But that the government could just engage in infrastructure projects, in this case, infrastructure projects to decarbonize us, to benefit nature somehow, that is good economics. This is a huge issue. You're going to hear more and more about this. This is something that people like Paul Krugman are going to make a big deal out of it and going to use their Nobel Prize in economics to really highlight and to say, look, I'm a Nobel Prize winning economist. I know what this is, right? Yeah, David says, printing money is a debt placed on the unborn. Yet, well, it's a debt placed on all of us and the unborn. Don't forget, you're going to have to pay for it. Your children who are already born, your grandchildren who might be already born, and future generations who are unborn, right? It's a debt on people, multiple generations. And he has audacity to speak about caring about the next generation. Guy is walking around with billions and wants us to shoulder the burden of helping the emerging world. Why doesn't he? Well, let's say he does. Still doesn't give him an excuse to enslave us to pursue values he believes in. Travis, thank you. Really appreciate that. But absolutely, David, I mean, it's the fact that these people claim to care about future generations as they're destroying them. Now, he will argue that he wants to tax, and that's how he's going to reduce the debt. He wants to print money to spend on infrastructure, climate change, nature, and at the same time tax the wealthy. Now, if you know even a little bit of math, you know that that doesn't add up. But that doesn't stop them. Reality has never stopped these people. Never stopped these central planners, authoritarians, little dictators. I don't know if Klaus Schwab is little, but he's a little dictator anyway. It hasn't stopped them from wanting to control our lives and run our lives for us. All right, let's keep going. So this is still under his 5 priorities. This is still the first priority.
Social contract.
Spilt into the second one.
Green economy. But number 3.
So the second one was green economy. So the first is reframe the social contract to be more inclusive and to include future generations, particularly as we'll see when it comes to climate change. The second one is to establish a green economy. Green economy means windmills and solar and whatever. Yeah, it really means a dramatic decline in standard of living and quality of life. And it means decarbonization. Carbon is the enemy. Carbon is evil, and we need to decarbonize. So that's the green economy. And it needs massive investments. Only government can make those investments. It needs massive printing of money or taking on government debt. That's what's needed. That's what needs to happen. Right? Third, what is number 3?
That's a major part also of the book, because, I published 4 years ago the book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution. All those technologies are very much advanced now by COVID.
The technology is advanced by COVID, right? I mean, notice you'll see the collectivistic way technology is treated and the deterministic way in which progress in technology is going to be defined. By the way, technology didn't advance because of COVID. I mean, there was extra investment in it. There were certainly improvements in it. There was massive use of it. There was scaling up of it. But technology itself, what are you talking about?
Digitalized, which can be digitalized. So how can we use the technologies to address the challenges, but at the same time, make sure that we create the necessary ethical, human-oriented principles around those technologies? Now
remember, ethical means altruistic. Ethical means what you do for other people. Ethical means sacrifice the able, sacrifice those who do, sacrifice those who have, sacrifice ability to none, right? That's what sacrifice means. That's what ethical means in their framework. Sacrifice means for them. Ethical means for them. God forbid it be for you, for your values. By the way, just as a point, we've got a lot of people listening live. That's great. We are now, thank you, Skylar. Skylar put in another $100. We are now at $850, plus or minus a little bit, $850. We're more than halfway to the goal of $1,500. Remember, we've got a match. We have got a contributor to the show, a supporter of the show, who is going to match dollar for dollar every dollar we raise up to $1,500. So if you want to support the show, this is a way to turn $1 into $2. So any amount that you put in, any amount is great, from $1 to $1,000. $1,000 would get us to our match very, very quickly. We don't, $750 would be enough. Actually, no, $650 would be enough. And we've had people who've stepped in and done $500 and closed these gaps very, very quickly. That would be great if we did that tonight, but if not, that's okay too. We'll keep getting 20s and 100s and 2s and 5s. There's another 100. Skylar, you better save some money for whoa. I think what's happening with Skylar is I think he's on a mobile app, and the mobile app is limited to $99.99. He can't do $100, but he just gave $300. So Skylar, thank you. That was me cheering on. Adam has a question on MMT. We're going to get to that. Thank you, Adam. I've lost count now on where we are, but we are getting very close to $1,000. So we're getting very close to. Yep, we're getting very close to $1,000. All right. Where were we? Yes, we were Klaus. Klaus, keep going, Klaus.
Son. Finally, what is the role of companies?
Not finally, because he really is only, this is his fourth point. He really has 5, so he can't count. But you'd expect that from Klaus. I don't know where Klaus made his money, if he inherited it. It sounds like he inherited it. But he might have been an entrepreneur. He might have, who knows how he made his money. But Klaus is on number 4, the role of the corporation. Now note that Klaus is not a socialist. He doesn't believe we should just take corporations and nationalize them. He doesn't believe that the state should own the means of production unless necessary. I don't want to give too much credit to Klaus. Klaus is a fascist, economic fascist, in the sense that he believes that corporations should be controlled by the state. That's what fascism is, when industry is controlled by the state. Skylar just did $500. Skylar, that is amazing. Thank you, and look forward to talking to you soon. Skylar's amazing. Linda, thank you. That's very generous. Adam, thank you. We'll get you a question in a little while. David, thank you. And we are at, 1,150. 1,150, maybe 1,160. I don't know if David's included there. So, we're getting close. 350, there we got 50 New Zealand dollars. Not sure exactly what that is, but emotions are not cognition. That is not me, that's Ayn Rand. But thank you, JDS, and it's absolutely true. All right, back to Klaus. In
this new post-COVID era, I think we are moving from short-term to long-term, from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism.
Now, I think I've done a show on this, and I'll probably do more shows on this in the future because this is a big topic. But stakeholder versus shareholder. Shareholder is supposed to be short-term. Tell that to the investors in Moderna who have been financed Moderna for a long time before it ever showed a profit. Tell that to the investors in Amazon who didn't see a profit for a long time. Didn't see the company make a profit for a long time. Tell that to biotech investors generally who get nothing, and for sometimes decades. Shareholder capitalism is capitalism and is long term. Indeed, it's stakeholder capitalism that is undoable And it's not long-term, it has to be short-term. There's no way to think about it long-term. So, the whole way they construct this is so bogus. And they say things, again, notice that when he says shareholder capitalism is short-term, everybody accepts it. Nobody challenges it. Nobody thinks about it. There is nobody on planet Earth is more long-term than American business driven by the stock market. Because, I mean, think about it. Where are all the investments made? Who does long-term R&D? Where does that happen? It's in this country, in the United States of America, which is not as capitalist as it used to be, but at least in certain sectors is quite capitalist, and at least in the way the private sector functions. Now, it could be longer term. I would argue that the regulations, the controls, are what make it short term. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Tobias. Really appreciate it. So the idea that stakeholder is something long-term, and stakeholder capitalism is so BS. There is no such thing. There's no something capitalism. There's only capitalism. Capitalism means freedom. And freedom means you get to invest in companies based on what they say they're going to do. And if a company wants to be a stakeholder, that is not to maximize shareholder wealth, then it should register as such. It should declare itself as such in advance, before I buy the shares. Because right now, according to the law in the United States, companies have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders to maximize their long-term value. That's their legal responsibility. So if you're suddenly switching to stakeholder, you're violating your fiduciary responsibility. Stakeholder means you treat everybody as important. Your employees, your suppliers, your customers, your debt holders, your shareholders, everybody. There's no one basis by which you make a decision. Now, again, I think I've done a whole show on this. I'll do another one because this is becoming more and more and more prevalent. But it's complete and utter nonsense. It's basically destruction of. It's anti-individualism. It's anti-self-interest, and it's definitely anti-capitalism. So it's not stakeholder capitalism. It's stakeholder fascism.
The COVID crisis has shown that companies who invest into their vitality instead of prioritizing short-term profits have performed much better.
How is this true? If you think about the companies that have performed well during the crisis, it's anybody from Amazon, which is invested in its vitality, but he would argue is a product of shareholder capitalism and short-term thinking. Imagine Jeff Bezos, a short-term thinker. How ridiculous that is. It's Amazon, it's Google, it's Apple, it's Facebook. Those companies have done very, very well. It's Zoom. Is Zoom a stakeholder cap? I mean, Zoom is just a standard Silicon Valley, very innovative company that's created a wonderful platform for the distribution of video conferencing and was there at the right time at the right place and then managed to leverage it and managed to create a great platform and a great product and scale it very, very quickly. And that's amazing. But those are the companies that thrived during COVID. How is that thriving? How is that thriving? Somehow condemnation of shareholder capitalism. Isn't that a product of the shareholder marketplace? So the whole thing is BS. Or think about Pfizer, the first company to come out with a vaccine. I mean, hated pharma did that. Hated American pharma focused on the bottom line did that. Or was it the German entrepreneurs who actually came up with the vaccine? Are they functioning? Didn't they just sell their company, their previous company, for 1.3 billion euros? Isn't that rather selfish of them? Aren't these the companies that have thrived, or Moderna? Aren't these the companies that have thrived under COVID? Isn't that the kind of companies we want? And if so, why are we moving toward the stakeholder model? The stakeholder model has created no successful companies during COVID. At least not that I know of. I don't know about you guys. I'm eager to see some examples.
That's what the stakeholders will expect in the future. And I should add, at last,
Here's his fifth
the
point.
need for much stronger global cooperation.
Global corporations, some more UNs, more, more. If we're going to shut people down, we should shut everybody down. Don't let people have choices. Let's just do it from the top down, right? Let's just everybody involved. Let's give more power to the United Nations.
COVID has shown us that we are globally interdependent, and I think it's a wake-up call to work in the future together to address all the consequences and to create a reset in our economic, social, ecological thinking.
And on
You know what global cooperation really means in a real sense? What global cooperation really means to me, for example? Global cooperation means trade. Trade is the best way to cooperate. It's win-win. It allocates resources. It's based on the price method. It's voluntary. People don't have to engage in it. You don't want to buy stuff from China, don't buy stuff from China. You don't want to buy stuff from Cuba, don't buy stuff from Cuba. It's very straightforward, very simple, very easy to do. It's trade. So yes, I'm all for more global cooperation by eliminating tariffs globally. Globally. By the way, if you eliminated tariffs globally, if you had the balls to call for that, which people like Klaus do not have the balls to do, then you would actually do more for the developing world, for places like Africa, than any foreign aid would ever do, any redistribution of wealth could ever do. And how is that? For example, if Europe got rid of tariffs on food, Europe has massive tariffs on agricultural products. I mean, Africa is a breadbasket. Africa is an agricultural powerhouse, potentially. Africa is very close to Europe. Shipping routes are very easy. Imagine the amount of imports coming in from Africa of food, good, organic, healthy, cheap food would come in to Europe from Africa, thus making Africa richer and at the same time, shockingly enough, win-win, remember trade is win-win, making Europe richer because the food would be cheaper. They'd have to spend less on food. They could spend more stuff, more on other things. Trade is the best way to deal with so-called global inequality. It raises the fortunes of those who don't have, but who can specialize in something like agriculture. We in the West don't want to do agriculture. Very few people in America do agriculture. Very few people in Europe do agriculture, but they're protected by the tariffs. We protect them. I had a guy at my seminar in Colorado. I had a guy come up to me who's a dairy farmer. And he says, I get your argument about free trade. But Canada subsidizes dairy farmers in Canada. I need protection from the Canadian government. So I need tariffs. So we need to tax Americans so that there's less competition for the dairy farmer in the United States. Not true, Canada's cheating, but who is it cheating? It's cheating its own people. It's cheating its own people. So we should tax our people because Canada is cheating its own people. And imagine if that was the standard. Imagine if every country in the world put tariffs on stuff that we subsidize in the U.S. We subsidize a lot of stuff in the U.S. Imagine we went country to country, figured out what they subsidized, put tariffs on them. That's not freedom, guys. That's not a free market. Instead, we in the United States should tell people, you want to subsidize your goods? Go ahead. We'll take your cheap stuff. We'll buy your cheap stuff. We're much better off with your cheap stuff. Thank you, David. Thank you, OMG puppies. And I told him this, and he said, yeah, but you're from a politician. How do you sell that? I said, you have to sell the big picture. You can't sell it in bits and pieces. You can't sell it in bits and pieces. By the way, Skylar, thank you. That was incredibly generous. Thank you. Yeah, I've got a lot of super chats. But we're going to try to get through them today. You know, we can do 2-hour shows. We can do 2-hour shows, particularly if the super chats keep coming in. We can keep going. I mean, this is good. I like this. I'm, you know, loving the support I'm seeing from you guys. So thank you. Thank you, all of you. So the global cooperation, I'm for. Trade, that's the way you do global cooperation. That's the way you do global cooperation. You let people voluntarily exchange goods and services and financial assets with one another. That's incredibly coordinating. If you've read Hayek, and you guys should read Hayek, his economics at least, prices, the price mechanism, is the best way to coordinate activity, human activity, in the economic realm. So if we want more global cooperation, more coordination, particularly in times of COVID, what we need are more free markets. What we need are less tariffs. What we need are fewer trade barriers. What we need is more prices, more trade, which leads to more cooperation, more coordination. JD, I'll answer this quickly, 50 New Zealand dollars. Are you against sanctions? No, I'm not against sanctions. Sanctions should be used when and towards a country that is a threat to you, or is doing things that you deem as threatening and anti your interests. But mostly I believe in the poles. Zero tariffs, or if a country is a real threat, embargo. Don't trade with them. Shut them down. But in the world in which we live in today, yeah, if I were president, I shut down my embassy in Beijing. I would withdraw completely from any agreements with China. I would have tariffs at zero, but I would do everything I could to penalize them for what they're doing in Hong Kong at the state level. But trade is not at the state level. The state has no involvement in trade unless China is the enemy. If China is the enemy, a danger to the individual rights of Americans, then you embargo them. Sanctions might be an intermediary step. So I'm not against sanctions. All right, yeah, we have 266 live. It would be great if we had more than 200 likes. So those of you joining, please like the show if you're enjoying it. Those of you here, if you enjoy it, like it. Before you leave, please press the like. It helps the algorithms on YouTube, helps raise the show, increases its visibility to new people, which is what we're after, is to get new people. And, it again shows support. So please press that thumbs up. Of course, if you're not a subscriber to the show, please subscribe. You can also, if you press the bell next to the subscription button, then you will also be notified when I go live. Thank you for everybody on the Super Chat supporting the show. I think we're, $50 short? Yeah, $41 short of the match. We've got a $1,500 match. Now, really, if we want to be technical about it, because YouTube takes a percentage, we really have to go over 1,500 for me to actually net 1,500. But we will get the match no matter what if we get to 1,500. 10 pounds get us a little closer, because 10 pounds is more than $10. So thank you. All right, let's see. So I want to boil down what this big reset is about. Basically, this is a global leftist policy. A global leftist policy that wants to use this crisis, never let a crisis go to waste, to use this crisis to bring about changes that they have wanted to bring about for decades. Really focused on three big issues. And you'll see why this is, in my view, more fascist than socialist. Travis, thank you. Ruther, thank you. We're almost there. Another maybe $15 and we're done. Issue number one, climate change. You're hearing this a lot, and you will hear this a lot. Climate change is COVID. Climate change is a hidden COVID. Climate change is COVID for future generations. Climate change needs as drastic a measures as COVID. We need the same kind of global coordination. We need same kind of government response. We need the same kind of government and private sector coordination and cooperation as we had with COVID, for example. A lot of credit is going to go to warp speed, this idea of the US government and European governments funding the pharmaceutical industries to produce the vaccine. And they're going to say, see, the government and private enterprise worked together and they made it. They created a vaccine. This is fantastic. And they're going to say, well, we can do the same to decarbonize the world. We can do the same to eliminate global warming. Now, look, I don't want to get into, and I'm not going to get into right now, the science of global warming. I'm going to put that aside completely. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Travis. Thank you, Agnew of the Desert. We are there. We have hit the mark. We are at $1,500. Thank you, everybody. This show has raised $3,000 for the Yaron Brook Show, the continued success of the Yaron Brook Show. I am looking right now potentially to buy a condominium here in Puerto Rico, and if I do, I plan to invest heavily in a studio. We will have a green screen. We'll have really cool background. We will have an improved. We'll get a better camera. We'll get a big improvement on setup and everything. Although I think you'll miss the sculptures and the paintings, but we will. And this money is going to make that possible. So thank you to all of you. Thank you to John who matched this. Thank you to all of you who participated. We can go to 2,000. Absolutely. I'm going to let you guys motivate each other to go to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. It's all good with me. There will be more matches. There's going to be a big match when we do Pride, when we do the episode on Pride. Thank you, Colin. So one is climate change. They want to decarbonize. Now, my view of climate, the whole thing about climate change is good luck, right? It's not possible to do. And any attempt to decarbonize, in other words, to drop fossil fuels, to move towards so-called renewable energies, is unless you're doing nuclear, which I don't think anybody's talking about in Europe and the United States, unless you're doing nuclear, it's basically a recipe for poverty, and it's actually a recipe for increasing carbon emissions. Germany is a good example of this. Germany has a mandate to shift to solar and wind. They shut down their nuclear power plants in order to achieve this. As they shut down the nuclear, shifted to solar and wind, not enough energy was produced. As a consequence of that, they had to recommission old coal plants. Coal, the dirtiest of all the fuels. Coal. Right? They had to recommission the coal plants. And now Germany actually has seen an increase in carbon emissions. An increase in carbon emissions because they went to solar and wind. Solar and wind are unreliable. Solar and wind are intermittent. The battery technology is not there to store it. When we have a better technology to store it, building the batteries, creating the batteries, the energy required the energy required to make the batteries is going to be enormously carbon usage. This is all nonsense. Yes, this is Germany that has increased its carbon emission because it went to solar and wind, which required it to then recommission coal plants. The Poles love it because the Poles mine the coal that the Germans are using in their new old coal plants, right? So thank you, Daniel. We can increase production value and retain aesthetic value. Yes, we will. We'll do both. We'll do both. Also, I'll do acoustic. I'll put in acoustic things to absorb the sound so that my sound is less harsh. We'll do all that stuff once I own the place and I can design the place and do it properly. So climate change is item number one of the Great Reset. And again, they're going to draw parallels to COVID. Global emergency. People are going to die if we don't do it now. Second, I've been talking about this for 10 years, for a long time. I've got a book about it. It's right there. And that's the whole inequality issue. We identified that at the Institute early on as one of the big issues coming down the pipe. one of the big issues that the left was going to latch onto, and global inequality. You're going to see a big push for an idea presented in Thomas Piketty's book, Capital in the 21st Century, or as I like to call it, Das Kapital, Das Kapital, which is, of course, the title of Karl Marx's book for the 21st century. That's inequality. It's about raising taxes, particularly on the wealthy. I think the thing that they are most attracted to, the thing that they're most inspired by, is a wealth tax. A 10% global wealth tax, so you can't hide your money anyway. 10% global wealth tax. That's in this plan for the Great Reset, is wealth taxes. Taxes on the rich, taxes on corporations, as if corporations pay taxes. And they pretend, although Thomas Piketty is more honest than this, but they pretend that this will somehow solve the debt problem. The amount of money you raise from the wealth tax is so puny as compared to the amount of money they want to spend on climate change, that it is a joke, their idea of claiming that this is something. Maybe the other thing they want to do, I wouldn't be surprised at all, is basically cut defense spending to zero. Wanda Freeman says Germany buys some power from France, which has nuclear. Yeah, France has nuclear energy. France is all in on nuclear. Good, and France has good nuclear power plants, so good for the French. So climate change, inequality, and the third one is what we already talked about, which is stakeholder theory, which is the destruction of the corporation. The destruction of corporation as an independent entity. The destruction of a corporation as a legal entity with a fiduciary duty to its owners. And in that sense, it is a destruction and undermining and a direct attack on private property. This is the agenda. You're going to see this across Europe. You're going to see this in the Biden administration. You're going to see this everywhere. And by the way, which of these would be opposed by Tucker Carlson? Tucker's huge on stakeholders, huge on stakeholder theory. Tucker is a big believer in inequality, then the government needs to do something about inequality. And I don't know what his position on climate change, but he's big on nature. I mean, what makes America great? I did this episode last time. What makes America great is nature. So the nationalist right is very much aligned with the Great Reset. This is not a left-right issue, although it's pushed, and the priority is primarily given by the left. Is Tucker Carlson opposed to a wealth tax? Well, he was very favorable towards Elizabeth Warren's economic plan, which included a wealth tax. Again, I think Tucker Carlson supports all these. I think he would ultimately support this agenda. The nationalist left, the internationalist left and the nationalist right ultimately agree on the main pillars of the Great Reset with one exception, which is the globalism. That's an anti-concept. But the idea of the importance of international organizations. The nationalist right doesn't believe in international organizations. The international left does, right? But that's really the only big difference. In terms of the actual policies, not that much. We're in trouble, guys. We're in trouble. And thank you, Brian. Thank you, Joe. We're in trouble because there is no organized opposition to what is being proposed at the Great Reset. And again, I've seen the podcasts that they're putting out. The podcasts bring people from the right and from the left and from the middle. Everything is reasonable. Everything is presented on a reasonable level. But the agenda is not reasonable. The agenda is anti-freedom, anti-liberty, anti-American, anti-capitalist, anti-individualist. And there's no opposition to it. We have to be the opposition. Now, I will say this. In spite of how bad all this sounds, and it is bad, it's not going to happen. This is my prediction. it's not going to happen. They will try. They will do it piecemeal. They'll do a little bit here and a little bit there. But there's too much opposition to the specifics. Not because there's a principle involved, but because when it comes to climate change, if we take a lot of money and build solar, where are we going to build it? And what about the desert rats? They're going to lose their habitat when we build massive solar plants. And what about the birds that get killed when we build the windmills? And what about all that pollution that is created when we make the batteries? There is no way these people can actually execute on it because it's so filled with contradictions. What about the future generations burdened with debt if we do all these things today? And if we do a wealth tax, what about the fact that it's not going to be a global wealth tax and that the wealthy will find ways to shield their wealth? And stakeholders, yes, a lot of businesses are going to come out and say, we're stakeholder friendly, we love stakeholders, we're friendly. How many of them are actually going to function that way? How many of them are actually going to sacrifice their profits, their long-term sustainability, which means profits, to some weird, unoperable theory? So we're going to hear a lot about this. We're going to see little dabbling in it. We're going to see pushes over here and investments over there and big talks and big lectures and big things. And at the end of the day, nothing much will change. We will slowly creep towards more and more government, more and more. But I don't see a revolution here. I don't see a massive takeover of the United States, of the economy, of the world. I see a bunch of incompetent fools fighting among each other for the spoils and ultimately failing. And again, the long-term real risk to all of us, to America, to Europe, to all of us, is not these incompetent idiots. It's not Klaus Schwab. It's what happens when Klaus Schwab fails. What happens when we descend into a depression because this is all BS, because they can't pull it off. And what happens in that circumstances is a strong man rises. The world is heading towards more authoritarianism. And at the same time, as I've said often, I'm super optimistic about technology and about the developing world and about their ability to rise up from poverty and about improvements over there and the knowledge that they have. But the West is what I'm afraid of. Not afraid of, sorry, afraid for. Afraid for. Yeah, Adam says, this will ultimately be as successful as the German that thought he had a great idea last century. Yeah, but you see, yes, but the thing with this is a bunch of incompetents. They're not going to unify anybody. There's not a singular agenda. It's an agenda of pressure groups. It's an agenda of people ripping each other to shreds. The strong man will arise from the chaos they create. This is the thing about the left. I've said this often. The left is not the end game. The left is an intermediary step. The left will create the chaos for the strong man to arise from. And the strong man won't be communist. He'll be fascist, as all of these attempts are really fascist attempts. So we will go backwards to the last century to bring about our strong man. Yes. Yes. All right. We will talk more about the Great Reset, I'm sure. The Davos conference is going to be in May. Maybe I can get invited. You think I'd be invited? You think they'd invite me to Davos? Am I a global celebrity enough to be invited to Davos? We can try. Maybe I can go do some podcasts from Davos while the World Economic Forum is going on and comment on the nonsense that they are doing. Yeah, I like that. We'll see. See if we can pull that off. See if anybody will allow me into Europe. You know, in this COVID world where I can't travel anywhere, can't go anywhere. Yep. By the way, the Great Recess, they don't hide it. The Great Recess is a great reset. Sorry, the Great Reset. The Great Reset is a great reset of capitalism. But they think what they'll get on the other side is a different version of capitalism. We don't have capitalism today. And what they get on the other side of this is more mixed economy, inefficiency, pressure group politics, more strife, more disagreement, more fighting, more nationalism rising up to oppose this. This is not going to end well for anybody. For anybody. All right, we are at $1,668.98. Wow. And we have met our match. The match of $1,500 will come in. So that is fantastic. Thank all of you, and that's very exciting. Of course, you can keep on doing it, and I will keep on taking your questions. Okay, let's run down the Super Chat questions. I will start with $50 questions and then go to, I think most of the questions are $20 questions, but we had a couple of $50 questions, or one. I think I did two. We have two $50 questions. The others I did on the fly. It deeply bothers me when intelligent people don't get objectivism. It was such a profound experience for me first reading Ayn Rand. The fact that other people don't experience that same sense of life response must mean they have an ugly soul. I mean, yeah, there's certainly truth to that. And I wonder how old you are. I'm not sure who asked that question, but I wonder how old you are. Because I certainly had, the younger I was, the closer it was to me reading Ayn Rand for the first time, the more violently I felt that. But the older I've gotten, the more appreciation I have for the difficulty that people have with objectivism. And yes, many of them have an ugly soul. Some of them have a cowardly soul. Some of them are just confused, psychologically, philosophically, thought-wise. Some of them are just not being taught how to think and can't use your mind very well. But yes, it is. I don't think it bothers me quite as much anymore because I've just come to terms with the fact, and I came to terms early because when I read Atlas Shrugged, it turned me on, and then I became a crusader for it, and I went out and immediately tried to convert everybody in my vicinity, and I discovered very quickly that was futile. All I was doing was creating enemies. All I was doing was creating people angry at me, and I wasn't changing anybody's mind. And I spent years trying to convert my family, my friends, anybody I meet. Right? I mean, my first date with my wife, I gave her the fountainhead. Now, that worked. But mostly it didn't. Mostly it didn't. So it's just a fact of reality that most people out there are not ready. The culture is not ready. The world is not ready. There's still a process of cultural evolution that has to happen before the world is ready. The world has to reject religion much more thoroughly than it has. And more important than that, the world has to reject altruism. And it has to reject altruism deeply and properly and thoroughly. And only then, only when they start having question marks around altruism, will people start being open to the ideas of objectivism. What repulses people from objectivism is the idea of self-interest, or not so much the idea of self-interest, because they don't even really delve into that. It's the rejection of altruism that really pisses them off. It's the rejection of altruism that really triggers them and turns them away from objectivism. And you need another enlightenment. Hopefully we can create it now rather than waiting 1,000 years. But we need another enlightenment. An enlightenment that embraces the ideas of self-interest. Embraces the ideas of individualism. And ultimately embraces the ideas of freedom. And it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot of intellectuals working on a lot of different dimensions. It's going to take education. It's going to take a lot of people writing on a lot of different topics, applying the ideas in a lot of different ways. It's going to take a lot. And look, the people who change the world are intellectuals. It's going to take a lot of work by the intellectuals, by new intellectuals, by old intellectuals. All right, what was the other $50 question? Here it is. Back again. Appreciate your content. Not sure where you went. I share it. That's fantastic. Sharing is the one way in which we can bring about a revolution. Sharing is the one way we can get into people's heads. Thank you for your work. That being said, it feels as if it is a losing battle fighting this anti-rationalism statism. It is clear freedom produces better results, but these people continue to win. They do continue to win. And it's going to be a losing battle for a long time. But you have to reconceive the context of the battle. The battle is not and cannot be and should not about changing the world and bringing freedom to the world. That, one day, we'll get there. The battle is one mind at a time. It's about changing one mind at a time. And if you have that perspective, if you have the perspective that when you bring objectivism into a person's life, you've made their life better. That when you bring objectivism into a person's life, you've made them now an ally. You've made them now a fighter for your ideas. If you have that perspective, then what we're trying to do becomes more real. What we're trying to do becomes more accessible. What we're trying to do becomes more achievable. I mean, I think, unlike Friedman's show, my interview with him, I converted, or not converted, no. I inspired a lot of people, I don't know how many, hundreds maybe, to check out Objectivism. Some of them will be inspired, will change their life, will become allies of ours. Some of them won't. But every day, if we can get a few minds, if every one of us sets a goal to change one mind at a time, one mind a week, one mind a month, one mind a day, I don't know, whatever scale you can do it, that changes the world. That will change the world. If you start out by trying to influence politics, if you start out by measuring our influence in terms of politics, then it's hopeless. It's hopeless. When I think that, I don't know how many people voted in the last election. I think it's 140 million people, let's say. 140 million people. 140 million people. I'm inspired by the fact that 100,000 listened to my interview with Lex Friedman. I'm happy that I've got 23,000 followers. We're talking about 140 million people. If I think about 140 million people, if I think about the need to change the minds of 140 million people, I can't do anything. It shuts me down. But if I understand that to change a culture means to change the minds of a few people, and those people will change the minds of a few more, and that some of the people whose minds I change or you change or Ayn Rand ultimately changes, some of them will go into education and influence the curriculum of the future. Some of them will go into science and use Ayn Rand's epistemology to discover new things in science. Some of them will go into art and create new romantic art. And the cumulative effect of all those people doing all those things will be what? Will be to change the culture. And the cumulative impact of changing the culture will be what? A change in the political world that we have. But if you start with the political, if you start with 145 million, it's over. It shuts you down. It's impossible to do. You've got to start with one mind at a time. And you've got to start with one mind at a time thoroughly changed. And you've got to start with go out there and do your thing. Influence the world in your way. Influence the world in those areas of life that you're engaged in. And particularly if you're in education, particularly if you're in the science, and particularly if you're in art, those are the areas where the world will be changed. David wants me to comment on an article. Yes, I've I've clicked on it. I'm going to save it, and I will at some point. I promise I will comment on it. There are a couple of articles that actually mention Milton Friedman. There's one article that tries to attribute try to square Milton Friedman with stakeholder capitalism, which is quite something. Daniel, I'm just gonna comment on this quickly. Can we hear your side of the Craig Biddle oncolytic controversy? Not sure if you read article TOS published that Carboni wrote. You're mentioning it. No, you're not going to hear my side of it. My side, basically the article is wrong. What he wrote is wrong. What he wrote is not accurate in any in any respect. But I don't want to get into it. It's you guys make your decision. I mean, I think the contradictions in the article itself that you can discover, and then you judge the article based on that. But again, these objectivist fighting within objectivism right now is not interesting. It's not philosophical. It's not ideological. It's squabbling, and it just doesn't interest me. I'm not interested in thing. If you think that I am the kind of person that is described by some of these people on various websites that I won't mention in various places, then stop watching my show and stop supporting me. But if you like the show and if you think I'm an honorable person, then great. That's all I request. I don't expect you to agree with every decision I've ever made. I don't expect you to hate, to take sides. I just expect you to judge me based on what you know. And not to take any random person or not random person's word when they smear me. That's all I'm going to say. I really don't want to get into it. It's so distracting. And I feel so bad about taking up your valuable time and all this precious, really good stuff. Daniel says, every mind won by objectivism is more valuable than the soapy mess it opposes. Absolutely. As Dr. Peikoff said, quote, the philosophy we need has now been formulated in its pure and therefore most powerful form. That's Ayn Rand. And yes, let's study Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff and let all this other garbage, put it to the side. Forget it, right? Let's see. Okay, now we're going to take some Super Chat questions. This is going to be a long show tonight, so buckle up, guys. I know a lot of people have left us. We were at like 260 live. Now we're 214. I know it's late for some of you, but buckle up. We've still got a lot of Super Chat questions to go on. And you can go out there and go to Twitter and stuff and tell people to come and join us because there's still a lot of good questions here that we're going to answer. Why did Ayn Rand think that Beethoven was too nationalistic? And where did she make that comment? I don't remember her ever saying he was too nationalistic. She talked about other composers having too much folk music and too nationalist in that sense. She thought Beethoven was malevolent, that he elevated struggle, conflict, to a metaphysical status, to an importance it doesn't deserve. But I don't remember her talking about him being too nationalistic. Not that I know of. Maybe I'm missing something. So I'm not sure where you took that. I love Beethoven. It's not that I disagree with Ayn Rand. It's just she didn't respond to Beethoven. I do. That's me. That's my sense of life. That's who I am. Beethoven is my favorite composer. You get me a Beethoven symphony, particularly something like the 7th or the 9th or the 5th or the 3rd, and I just, and same with the piano concertos, with the chamber music, with the sonatas, with the piano sonatas, with the violin sonatas, with all, I just love Beethoven's music. So, me and Ayn Rand had slightly, not dramatically, but slightly different taste in music, partially because we have different sense of lives. She grew up in a different era than I do, had different experiences than I do, came to different conclusions than I do. Psychologically, we're different people. Can you imagine? Objectivists being different people and not agreeing 100% with one another about music. Would you recommend reading Wealth of Nations? Is there much to gain from it still today? Not unless you're particularly interested, not unless you have some historical interest or some particular interest in Adam Smith or that period on the Enlightenment or things like that. It's a great book and it's an important book in history, But there are better articulations of the same point that you can find in certainly in the Austrian economists and in economists like, in 19th century economists, in Bastiat and Say, and certainly in Mises and so on. So I would only do it if it was a specific interest of yours, something that was a real passion. I mean, to know the history. It's also not easy to read. 18th century English, the way he formulates his argument, not easy to read. I would much rather recommend Economics in One Lesson. Have I ever heard of a Fifth of Beethoven by Walter Murphy? No, I have not. What are your thoughts on Boca Raton, Florida? Would you ever consider retiring there? I mean, Boca Raton is beautiful. A lot of places in Florida are beautiful. Right now I live in Puerto Rico. I see no reason to leave Puerto Rico. My taxes in Puerto Rico are lower than they are in Florida, significantly lower than they are in Florida. At some point I'll probably have to move to the mainland, maybe if my health deteriorated, if I wanted to be close to a world-class hospital or something like that. I'm not a huge fan of Florida. It kind of bores me. I don't know where I would go when I retire. And I'm never going to retire, but in the sense of want to be close to a world-class hospital. Maybe California, although taxes there are high, obviously, but I'd be retired, so I wouldn't have really any income. Maybe Arizona, maybe Texas. I love Austin. If I could not be there in the summers, that would be good. So I don't know where I'm ultimately going to retire, but it's unlikely to be Florida, even though I'm used to the humidity now because I live in Puerto Rico. Why is Trump playing baby games instead of just conceding the election? Can Rudy Giuliani pull this off for him? Would you ever debate Rudy Giuliani? Sure, I would debate Rudy Giuliani. I don't know what a debate with Rudy Giuliani would look like because I don't think he could debate. I don't think he would be disciplined enough to debate. I think it would very, very quickly become a shouting match. Can Rudy Giuliani pull it off for him? No. I'm going on record. I don't think there's any way Donald Trump could have reversed the results of this election. They're too solid. Their claims of fraud are too unsubstantiated and not systemic enough. You might have a case of fraud here and a case of fraud there, but there's no indication that hundreds of thousands of votes or even tens of thousands of votes have been changed as a consequence. But, we'll see. But my prediction is no, Rudolph Giuliani will not pull it off. Why is he doing it? Because Donald Trump is very smart. There are two reasons, well, not very smart, but there are two reasons for him doing this. And, I apologize for bringing up Trump, but somebody asked a question, so you'll have to just tolerate this. One, Trump suffers, and has always suffered, and I've said this since 2015, suffers from a real primacy of consciousness mentality. That is, an identification by Ayn Rand for a mentality that thinks that if you wish it, if you believe it, if you want it to be, then it will be so. That reality follows your desires, your wishes, your consciousness. And Trump definitely has it. You can see it all the time in his comments, in his statements, in the way he addresses issues. And this is pragmatism. It's partially this is pragmatism. If I wish it, if I think I won the election, therefore I won the election, therefore it's your job to prove that I won the election. So reality doesn't play a big role in what Trump believes is true and what Trump believes is false. It's his beliefs. It's his, emotional state. It's his whim that drives what he believes is true and what he believes is not, is false. So one, I think he believes he won. Not because his beliefs are based on evidence, but because he is conditioned to believe in things without evidence. That's who he is. That's what he is. That's how he functions. That's reason number one. Reason number two is, what is Trump's appeal? Particularly to those who are passionate supporters of Trump. Not the casual supporters of Trump. The passionate supporters of Trump. The people who I called apologists, and I guess I should clarify, the people who will make excuses for anything he does. What is the appeal? The appeal is his willingness to fight the establishment. And not fight the establishment in a real way, because he hasn't done any of that. But to fight the establishment in appearance, to fight the establishment in his, to be a fighter, to stand up to the establishment. Again, not in action, not in legislation, not in actually passing laws, not in actually figuring out how to maneuver around the deep state, but in actually standing up to the so-called deep state, the so-called to the left and everybody else. And this is theater. He is going to leave the White House saying, I won. They stole this election. I'm going to fight them tooth and nail. I'm always going to fight for you, the American people. I'm always going to fight for you, Trump supporters. People are going to love him for it. People are going to follow him anywhere for it. This is unbelievable marketing for his brand. His brand is the guy who stands up to the left. The guy who stands up to the corruption. The guy who stands up to the deep state. And he's brilliant at it. He's brilliant at it. Now, whether he starts his own TV channel or whatever he does, he is going to continue to be the center of attention for a whole part of the Republican Party. He is going to be a kingmaker in the Republican Party if he doesn't run again. It might be his son, who knows who it will be, but he will be a kingmaker. And, this is huge. But again, it's theater. And he's playing his audience. And he knows his audience. He understands his audience. And as somebody who understands his audience, this is what his audience wants. His audience wants a fighter. His audience wants him not to concede. His audience wants to believe there's massive fraud. His audience wants to believe that the American people would never vote Trump out. That's ridiculous. And the only way, we heard this before the election, people would say on this show, on my chat, they would say the only way Trump loses is if there's massive fraud. Well, now he's playing to them. To them. So, yeah, I mean, he's a martyr to them. And he'll win. He'll win in the sense that he will solidify his place in their hearts and solidify whatever he does in the future. He will solidify their support. All right, a couple of $50 questions. Many people have, and I think rightly so, identified the religious aspects of leftist pro-ideologies such as anti-racism, climate activism, social justice, etc. Do you think they are, as Peterson hints at, religious substructures that are inherent? No. I think what is inherent is the need of people to have an explanation for the world around them. What is inherent is for people to need an explanation and to have an ideal, to have something to fight for, to have something to believe in, to have something to strive towards. And that could be adoration to Donald Trump, adoration to the state, adoration to your tribe. All of those have religious elements to them. I think the Trump syndrome there's a religious element to that. Anything he does, he's like Jesus who walks on water. As he said it in the campaign. He said, I could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and get away with it. Only religious people would do that, right? Would vote for that. So there's definitely a religious element in any of these. Now, I have spoken. I did a show on race, what do you call it? White fragility. And there's no question, and about anti-racism. I did a few shows on anti-racism. Definitely religion. I've done a whole show about intersectionality and how religious that is. Right? And thank you, John. John here is on the chat, and he says he'd never heard of me until the Lex podcast, and he's excited to be exposed to, I don't think I'm a great mind, but to a mind like Iran's on the internet. Great. I mean, welcome, John. Thank you for joining us. This is great. This is why I do what I do. and why I did that interview. And I'm so excited about bringing new people into the fold, into our little universe here of fighters for future. And look, so they need an explanation for the world. That's what philosophy serves. But philosophy requires you to think. Philosophy requires you to integrate. Philosophy requires you to understand. Unfortunately, people are lazy. So combine laziness with the need for an explanation and you get religion. And then religions can come with various forms. So it's not that we have substructures that are inherently religious. It's that religions satisfy a real need to know, to understand the world. And again, anti-racism, everything's in terms of racism. It's religion. Climate activism, you've got people who need to sacrifice. You've got saints. You've got original sin. You've got all the characteristics. The same with social justice or intersectionality. But the same again with Trump and the same with certain aspects of the right. It's the same kind of attitude. Wow, we're getting more super chat questions. I'm going to fade here soon, right? It's 9:45 in Puerto Rico. If you've read The Fountainhead, Atlas and Opa, but you still think we have to love skyscrapers and hate Beethoven, pick up a copy of Understanding Objectivism. Absolutely. It's a difficult text, but it helps one correct a lot of errors like this one. Yes, I've often recommended Understanding Objectivism. I've only listened to the course, and I recommend listening to the course while you read the book, because Leonard has a pacing and a mannerism that makes it not as hard. He's such a great teacher that when you put it in a book, it loses some of that teachiness that Leonard brings to the table. So I would recommend listening to the course. This is a must course. Let me just say, this is a must course for all objectivists. Understanding Objectivism by Leonard Peikoff. You really get a sense of what it means to integrate objectivism into your life and how to avoid the common errors that most objectivists, at least early on, fall into. So read or listen to Understanding Objectivism by Leonard Peikoff. Joe asks, do you have any advice for practicing objectivism on a professional level? I plan on going to school for philosophy once I can afford to and attending OAC. But do you have advice for steps one can take beyond or alongside that? Yes, I mean, I would study the ideas. So going to OAC is great. I definitely think you should do that. But in the meantime, I would listen to Leonard Peikoff's courses. That should be the main thing you do. Read Ayn Rand. So every week, pick an essay, a nonfiction essay by Ayn Rand. Read one nonfiction essay by Ayn Rand every week. There are hundreds of them. So there's plenty of weeks, plenty of essays for plenty of weeks. Just do that. And spend a week on it so you can try to really understand it and try to figure out what exactly she means, because essays are very complex. Sometimes it's worth reading the essay twice or three times during that week. So do that. And then start listening to Understanding Objectivism and the philosophy of objectivism and the moral and the course on morality that Leonard Peikoff has, and philosophy through induction, or objectivism through induction that Leonard Peikoff has. So start listening to Leonard Peikoff courses. The way to learn objectivism is directly from Ayn Rand and from Leonard Peikoff. And I would definitely spend your time, while you're doing everything else that you're doing, studying the ideas. By the way, if somebody kept a running total of where we are, that would be really helpful if somebody could publish that. I know I'm really thankful to those of you who have, but we've got a bunch of money recently, and I just would like to know where we are. I think we're close to 2,000. All right, let's jump over. Yeah, Stephanie was doing it. Stephanie, thank you for doing it. But have you managed to keep in touch? And we of course have. And here's David Franco giving me another question. He wants to keep me up all night. But thank you for the contribution. But let's stop the questions. How about that? Please. Otherwise I won't be able to answer them today. So let's hold on the questions. I'll try to get to everything that's already been asked quickly, but let's not do any more. Evil lives off suckers who think they're too good to see evil. They're not good enough. Evil lives off of good people who won't stand up to evil. Evil lives off of cowards. Evil lives off of pragmatists. Evil lives off of people who won't actually stand up against it. Evil lives off of people who stay silent, who don't stand up to it, who don't challenge it, for whatever reason. Evil is impotent. Evil is impotent. Evil is impotent when faced with the good. Daniel says, don't tell me to stop super chats. This is America. You need some exclamation points, exclamation marks there, Daniel. Oh, man. How do we get over being unsure of yourself? How do you get over being unsure of yourself? What's the process of building that Dagny Taggart certainty? It's challenging yourself. It's pushing yourself. You know you're unsure of yourself. We're all unsure of ourselves when we start out because we don't know. But it's doing. It's acting. It's engaging. It's being willing to fail. So, and be willing to learn from your failure. Oh, what did I do wrong there? But you're never going to gain confidence, let's say, walking up to a girl and talking to her, until you start walking up to girls or women and talking to them. And some of them will slap you metaphorically, hopefully, not really. And you'll fail. But then you'll say, okay, what did I do wrong? Was I too obnoxious? And the same with a job, the same with content you're trying to learn. Challenge yourself. Push yourself. Be courageous. Courage is an important virtue. It's not one of the 7 objectivist virtues, but it's an important virtue because it's how you're going to build up that self-esteem. It's how you're going to build up that confidence by being courageous and trying things and pushing yourself. And don't shy away from reality. Objectivism is about embracing reality. Embrace it and embrace the challenges that it represents. Did Ayn Rand believe consciousness wasn't made of matter but of energy? That's why we don't know how properly to study it with our present levels of technology. How did she know that? Well, I mean, she didn't. She said she didn't know, i.e. know knowledge. She didn't know what consciousness was made of, right? None of us do. Oh, Jason will not give me a break. She didn't know. We don't know. But consciousness is not just matter. It can't be. It doesn't exhibit any of the characteristics of matter. It's clearly doing something we're not familiar with. So it's either a different kind of matter or energy or the consequences of a certain combination of matter. But we don't know from a scientific perspective what consciousness is. We know what it does. We know what its function is. But we don't know the physics of it or the biology of it. Right? And she didn't know. She speculated that it was some kind of energy. I think she speculated that. I can't remember when she said that. But it was more speculation. It wasn't, that's not part of her philosophy. That's not a philosophical statement. At the end of the day, science has to kind of figure that out. Jason asks, when I argue with non-objectivists about trading value for value, a typical response I get is many people don't have any value to trade in the marketplace, like retarded people. Are acts of generosity and benevolence a trade? They are, because you get satisfaction from the idea that you're helping somebody. But look, even retarded people, don't you sometimes see people with Down syndrome at the grocery store bagging bags? There is need for people who do that. Now, one of the great things about genetic engineering in the future is that we won't have retarded people. Yes, accidents will happen, and you'll lose your capabilities because of accidents. And some generosity and benevolence will be needed to take care of some people. But the more we advance technologically, the fewer people there will be who need that. The more technology, the more medicine, the more biotech, the more genetic engineering will be able to give us a world in which we don't have people who are born in a condition that does not make it possible for them to survive through their own efforts in the world. But generosity and benevolence is a trade in the sense that what you're getting in return is the knowledge you helped somebody and the value that presents to you of knowing that another human being is better off because of your assistance. All right. But it's interesting to me, and this is worth pointing out to them. There's a very small percentage of the world population that is retarded. Why should we build a political system and a moral system based on this tiniest of minorities? Based on the outcomes to them? Shouldn't you build an economic, political, and moral system around a healthy, well-functioning individual and his life and his prospects to live on this world? Isn't that what the focus should be on? Thank you, Stephanie. Really appreciate the math. We're at $1,943, $44 really, if we round up a little bit. $1,944. That's amazing. That is amazing, and we get the $1,500 match. And just thank you, everybody. I'm really touched, and the contribution will really, really help. All right, on the Friedman podcast, you said win-lose always degenerates to lose-lose. That's a really interesting thought. Could you comment on how you see that happening? I mean, think about it. Let's say, let's take an example. Let's say you have an employee who you treat badly. They feel like you require them to work overtime. You don't pay them. You don't recognize their ability. You're getting something out of them because they're working, but you're not. So it's win-lose. You're winning, they're losing, right? Because they're frustrated and they're not enjoying it and they're not happy and they're not being compensated for it and all of that. What happens? Well, either the employee leaves, you lose, or the employee stops doing good work, you lose. Now, it's not that he gains. Now, if he leaves, he gains in a sense. But the losing leads to you losing. You forcing a loss on him makes it your loss. Think about negotiating with the supplier in business. And let's say you're such a tough negotiator, you lower his price so low that he's losing money on the deal. So it's you win, he loses. Is he going to want to supply you in the future? Is he going to be as meticulous about providing you with the best product possible, even in the present? Is he going to next time try to screw you so that he wins and you lose? Again, it's turned into a lose-lose. Think about a relationship with a spouse. Imagine you do things with a spouse that create where she feels like she's losing and you're gaining. You're gaining at her expense. You don't think there's a price to pay? You don't think she's going to take it out on you in some way? You don't think you will lose ultimately from that? Of course you will. I don't know of a situation where win-lose doesn't turn into a lose-lose. You can imagine if you did it once and the supplier went away and it only happened once and, maybe you could do it once. But even then, doing it once and it works now makes you think it's a habit. And then you do it more than once and then you lose. So, yeah, you can think of examples. Feel free to ask me in future shows follow-up questions on that. It's a really interesting issue, but think about both in the psychological dimension and in the existential dimension, how a win-lose turns into a lose-lose. It always does. Those are a few examples. Hopefully they're clarified. Do you think climate change was going to lead to the reset, but that wasn't working fast enough, so now it's COVID? I think they wanted the reset for a long time. Climate change is too distant, too remote, too in the future, too wobbly, it's not really consistent. So they couldn't get it fully across. They were getting pieces of it, but they couldn't get the whole thing. Two things have happened. One, COVID, emergency. We need to do something. Don't let an emergency go to waste. Don't let a crisis go to waste. But secondly, they've been working on this for decades. All these issues, climate change, inequality, stakeholder capitalism, or what they call capitalism, all of that is being in the works intellectually at universities all over the place for decades. And now they can leverage all of that. They can leverage that and easily get people on their side. All right, whew. 2 hours, guys, 2 hours. You're draining. I shouldn't complain because we just raised $3,500, so I shouldn't complain. But it's not a bad night's work. Is it immoral to deliberately create bad art, such as modern art, specifically for the purpose of making lots of money? Yeah, I think it is. Because it's self-destructive. It destroys your own soul. You're a fraudster, and you know you're committing fraud. You're selling something that doesn't have a value, indeed has a disvalue. And that's a fraud. It's a fraud on the people who are buying it, but more importantly, it's a fraud on yourself. The money doesn't mean anything in that case, because it's not value for value. It's not win-win. It's lose-lose. So yes, it's absolutely immoral to create bad art just to sell it. If the U.S. embraces objectivism, should we sell all our modern art to foreigners? Why? What did they ever do to you? And who's our modern art? Who's the our? So if the U.S. embraces objectivism, we should let every individual who owns modern art decide what he wants to do with it. My preference is burn it or destroy it in some way, or use it as decoration. You know, it's decorative. It's not art, but some of it is pretty. And that is, so I don't want to inflict the damage on other people. The response to COVID has been constant moving goalposts, upending the deadlines, and the lack of long-term coordinated planning. Philosophically, what do you think is responsible for such scattered short-range thinking? Pragmatism. Pragmatism is scattered short-range thinking. Pragmatism is not having principles. Pragmatism is not having a plan. Pragmatism is changing your mind from day to day. Pragmatism is fear and panic because your plan, the limited one, the short-term one, didn't work. And now you're panicked and you don't know what to do, so you impose a new short-term plan. So philosophically, this is the consequence of pragmatism and emotionalism. Pragmatism and emotionalism. And you got that from the White House and you get that from the governors. The pragmatism is everywhere. And of course, it's also an opportunity for power lusters, particularly among the governors, to grab power, to take advantage of a crisis. Don't let a crisis go to waste. That's the theme today. This is MMT you're on. They don't want to pay for spending with taxes. They only want to spend and only use taxes to control inflation when it kicks in. They know it's BS, but it's a way to achieve wealth redistribution. I don't think they know it's BS. I think that people like Stephanie Kelton really believe it. I've met Stephanie Kelton. She's a believer. And I think many of them want to believe it, so they evade. They don't look there. They don't think deeply, purposefully, because it's convenient. But if you listen to, what was his name? The guy who was doing that podcast. Some of them, the old-fashioned ones, the older ones, are worried about the debt. And they use the debt and are going to use the debt, and you'll see this. They're going to use the debt as an excuse to raise taxes. particularly on the wealthy. They'll use two things, the debt and inequality, as excuses to raise taxes. So yes, I agree with you about MMT, which is unbelievably dishonest, I think, in the way it's applied. Although, again, MMT has a few things that are true in terms of its identifications, but it's dishonestly applied. It's more than that, because it's also old line Keynesians, and it's people who want to tax the rich. Okay, this is what I'm worrying about when I asked about the World Economic Forum yesterday. This Build Back Better, Great Reset, and it's 2030, and I don't own anything, and I'm happy and nonsense. Yeah, you're going to see more and more of that. Now, not everybody who is Great Reset is also, I don't own anything and I'm happier. So you have to be careful in evaluating these things. If you just read kind of right-wing media, they will take all the examples of the radical, the worst kind of leftists, and how they would like to do the reset. Most people involved in the Great Reset are middle of the road. This is what makes them so dangerous. They're not far-out leftists. They're kind of middle of the road. They believe in private property. They want corporations. Corporations run for the common good. They want private property at some level. They don't believe that if you own anything, you'll be happier. That's what makes them more dangerous. If it was just a bunch of hippies running around naked saying, you don't own anything, I'm happy, nobody would take them seriously. The problem here is it's going to be real economists, real intellectuals, not thinkers, real intellectuals, middle-of-the-road people who embrace this and push it. And that's important for me to get across. This is not some crazy, far-out, left-wing, nutty idea. This is now the mainstream. This is now the middle of the road. This is now where the elites are. You don't have to be Antifa to buy into the reset. The reset is much more broad-based than that, and that's what makes it so dangerous. All right, high-temperature superconducting, magnets, is making nuclear fusion look feasible with small reactors. MIT has some good videos on YouTube. I mean, yes, there is some great technology coming down the pipe to make small nuclear reactors and fusion and all this stuff possible. And it's super exciting. And if that's where the focus on, I wouldn't be that worried. But they're still obsessing about stupid windmills and solar energy. Nuclear is the way to go. And there's so many nuclear companies now, small nuclear companies, research at MIT and other places, where they're doing really interesting work on nuclear power. That should be the future. Something always made me uneasy about the idea of the new normal, the great reset, or seems like the next logical step. Do you think that this will gain traction under Biden, or will we will see this reset start outside the United States first? No, it's definitely going to gain traction under Biden. This fits right into Biden. Again, it's not, he will do the moderate version of it. He's not going to do a $30 trillion Green New Deal. He'll do a $2 trillion Green New Deal. He's not going to do a 10% wealth tax. I doubt he'll do any kind of wealth tax. He'll increase corporate taxes a little bit. So he will articulate the Great Reset. That will be his guiding ideas, but he will do a moderate, lame, middle-of-the-road version of it that won't destroy the U.S. economy. It will set us back or won't destroy us, and will actually piss off the left. The far left will be very upset with the Biden administration. I have no doubt about it. The problem is, again, what's the opposition? If the opposition is nationalist conservatism, any kind of version of nationalism, then it can't win, in the sense that to win it will cave. The only opposition has to be principled opposition, and only we can supply that. There are very few of us in the free market world who can supply that. And it's primarily philosophical, and in that sense it has to be objectivism. Now that Biden will be president, do you think sales of Atlas Shrugged will spike And do you think that that will be mostly angry Republicans or people looking for real answers? Unfortunately, I don't think there was spike like in 2008-9, because the angry Republicans have given up on Atlas Shrugged as their guide. There was a period during the Tea Party where they seemed to believe that Atlas Shrugged was the guide to the future. But Trump has destroyed that, eviscerated that. Now the future is kind of economic nationalism. Now the future is being anti-trade, anti-China, protectionism, nationalism, economic central planning. That's the future is Tucker Carlson. If you think about it, after 2008-9, when Atlas Shrugged peaked in 2009, even Hannity was mentioning Atlas Shrugged. People at Fox were all talking about Atlas Shrugged. Glenn Beck was on a huge Atlas Shrugged thing. Would Glenn Beck promote Atlas Shrugged now? No. Would Tucker Carlson? No way. Would Hannity? No way. So the right has changed for the worst in a significant way. And whether I think Trump was an indication of that change, but also accelerated that change. He couldn't have become president without that change already happened to some extent. He's broadened that. So the right, from a perspective of freedom, I think is destroyed. It has to be rebuilt. And now I do think Atlas Shrugged sales will go up, but it's not going to be from the same angry right, and it won't be on the same scale as it was in 2009. If it is that common, how can I get people to think? I constantly explain economics, but I'm getting this. Well, that's how it is, but not how it should be response. That's perfect. Because economics is not where the action is. I've said this over and over again in my talks everywhere. The action is morality. The action is ethics. The action is altruism versus egoism. That's the action. That's what changes people's minds. That's what's important to people. It's the way life should be, not the way life is. It's the way what the moral ideal is. And until you change, until you shift their moral perspective, you can talk economics till you're blue in the face. I mean, a few people will change their minds, but mostly they won't. Wanda Freeman says you can talk to the right, the left won't listen. Well, you should try talking to the right sometimes on an issue like immigration, and you get shouted off the stage like I have been, right? Booed off the stage. So you can talk to the right about some things, and you can talk to the left about some things, and there's certain things you cannot talk to the right about, and there's certain things you cannot talk to the left about anymore. It used to be, I used to be able to talk to the right about everything. Not anymore. Look, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been talking to the left and right for 20 years. And the problem is the left won't come. But if they come and listen, I've had more success converting people on the left than I think converting people on the right. You know, people have come to debates thinking that they supported the socialist and walked out of it going to read Ayn Rand. I know people like that. So, no, it's not clear to me at all, that you can find superficially common language, but you're talking about two different things. Everybody loves the Founding Fathers, but their understanding of the Founding Fathers is very different than mine. Very different. Now, the left is worse as well. So, yes, the real action is on the moderate left and the moderate right, kind of the more centrist. That's the people you can convert. That's the people you can change. Is it true that Ayn Rand didn't get her cats fixed so they could experience the pleasure of orgasm? Just something random I heard on the internet. It could be, and I wouldn't be surprised if that were true. I can't remember. It seems to be right, but I can't remember. Is this about one world order? To some extent, yeah, I think some of the people, not everybody, around the Great Reset would like greater influence to international organizations. So whether they want really, literally one world order, one government, I don't know. Some of them do, some of them don't. But they certainly want greater influence to IMF, the World Bank, and the United Nations. Not good organizations. I could do a show on each one of those. Not good organizations. What kind of meal do you try at a new restaurant? The house special or a particular favorite of yours? Well, it really depends on the restaurant. There's no guiding principles. I like to go to restaurants where they have a tasting menu, and I get the tasting menu. I typically don't do the house special. I do what I think I'm going to like from the description or from pictures I've seen or from something like that. And I like to try different things. That's why I like tasting menus. Danish central bank outsources a printing press to a private French company. A lot of countries do that. I know a private company in Canada that prints all the Canadian money, but prints money for other countries as well. And they also do things like driver's licenses and other things for security reasons. And the guy who owns it is actually an objectivist, and he's printing money for governments. What's your view of RECP? I don't know what RECP is. How do we fight pragmatism if life is not getting worse under a mixed economy? Pragmatism seems to be more dangerous than socialism. Yeah, I think pragmatism is more dangerous short term than socialism. I think it's hard to fight when things are not getting worse. But things, unfortunately, will get worse. And people know that spiritually, at least, they're getting worse. Because if you think about it, that's the angst that people feel. It's why people are gravitating to a tribe. It's why people are either on the left, on the right, on the far left, far right. That is a consequence of they feel like things are getting worse, and we need to capitalize on it. Okay, these have to be the last two questions. You guys, I have to stop. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes. Yaron, today I told the truth in a very difficult situation. My mind raced for excuses fueled by my emotions. After reining in my fears, I knew with a clear mind that I would survive and flourish by being honest. Thank you. Cool. Excellent. Thank you, Ryan, for sharing that. It's great to hear. I assume you were inspired by objectivism and the objectivist ethics by a principle of honesty, and I'm sure it'll work out much better than any lie you could have told. Gene says, ex-socialists here. I even went to a Bernie Sanders rally in 2015. Thanks, Yaron. Life is so much better now. Yes. Excellent. Do you think there was anything intentional about COVID? No, other than the incompetent response. But no, I don't think there was anything intentional about COVID. There was certainly the Chinese held back information about COVID, early on. But even that is exaggerated because, we knew in the United States in January about COVID and about how dangerous it was. Trump admitted that in his conversations with Bob Woodward. So we knew there's no excuses. But no, I don't think the virus was not engineered. It was not released purposefully out there. I demand that you answer this question. What is your favorite color? It's actually dark blue. The color of the ocean when it's dark blue. All right, guys, thank you. This has been great. I don't know what the count is now. Stephanie, maybe you can do a quick addition, but it's very, very close to 2,000. Maybe it's already reached 2,000 with David Franco's $10. Hey, just an extra donation, not a quick question. Thank you for the work again. Oh, my pleasure. Thank you guys for the support. You guys are really fueling me. And you ask questions that you should be asking the person that's relevant, right? Why are you asking me that? Ask him. I mean, I have a theory. I don't think he'd necessarily agree with that theory, but ask him. Don't ask me why other people do what they do. Ask them. And then I'll tell you, maybe that's a true answer, or maybe it's not. Anyway, I don't really care. So all of you obsessed with the inner workings of people disliking each other. Anyway, tonight was too good of a night to end it like that. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for the support. We got to $1,990 plus a $1,500 match. So that's almost $3,500. That is a good day's work, if I say so myself. And hopefully we can have many more like this in the months to come. As I said, we'll have a $2,000 match soon when we do the episode on Pride. Baruch asked quickly, what does a 23-year-old in college do do about the future? Should I continue to do a master's? It sometimes seems like there isn't one. Yes, there is a future. Keep working. Keep pursuing your values. Don't let the world stop you from living. Living. Life is too precious. And, there is a whole optimistic spin on things that once in a while you'll hear me do. And I'll do more of that starting in January. All right, everybody. Thank you. I'll see you on Thursday. Bye, everybody.